Hello and welcome to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is Felix Schultz, and with me is
Andy Green, as always.
Andy Green, as always. Welcome to OT, the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Guest on my own show.
Our own show, Andy. Our own show.
We have two guests this week, Felix.
Wow.
Not one,
Do
two.
they show up together? Is it like a double date situation?
Guest swap. No, we have two quite big names, I would say. We have Chris Grainger-Herr, CEO of IWC Schaffhausen.
Nice.
Who we spoke to under secret embargo, I want to say like January or February, to talk about sort of the new releases, which are now out, so we can now kind of hit publish.
Yep.
And our second guest is Brian Govberg from WatchBox / Govberg Jewelers. He's the director of, I think, both companies. And we have a chat to Brian about sort of building the Dream Watch collection for $50K USD. You and I partner up on this, which was, always interesting.
Hence the double date.
Well, yeah, 2-on-1. So we put our collective OT minds together, and
you went over budget as always.
In typical Andy fashion, we went over budget. So yeah, it's quite an action-packed episode today, Felix.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been wearing a new watch that got sent to me from the charming Etienne from Baltic.
What a man.
He seems lovely. I'd like to meet him one day, but who knows when that'll be. I've been wearing the brand new Baltic Aquascaf Jewel Crown, which has just been announced. It's on pre-order on April 14 or until April 14. It's got two crowns because it's a tribute to those classic super compressor dive watches, which I am very much on record as being a fan of.
Big fan.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first sort of mildly, vintage expensive watch I bought was a dual crown super compressor diver that I don't have anymore because it was an Accutron and they're terrible to repair. But this one is reliability. Apparently, it'll be very reliable because it's a Miota movement inside, and you can't go wrong with that. Yep. It's a different feel to the traditional Aquascaf. It's a lot sort of. It feels more modern. It feels sort of more 70s or 60s as opposed to the 50s vibe of the original one. Cleaner, like there's obviously no dive bezel. It's internal. Really nice glossy black dial and sort of a big white lume plots that are pretty sort of thick. Yeah, like it's kind of got those Seiko vibes. No sort of fauxtina on them. On this one, I'm not sure about the other colorways. But one thing I do like about it is sort of with the details. And you'd think it's sort of hard to get into the details on a pretty sort of minimalist design like this. But aficionados of the super compressor style will know that the cases that I think Esper made had like a cross-hatched design on them, and they've sort of replicated that, which is a nice touch. And ditto, they've got sort of like very specific sort of radial brushing on the bezel, which is quite flat on the top, and that's actually picked up on the hands. So the hands and the bezel are, sort of very industrially sort of brushed tool finish, which I think is quite a thoughtful touch. Good size, 39 mil across, 11.9 tall. Do you know what the other thing I really love about it is, Andy? Can you guess?
The price.
No, but that's very good too. 550 pre-order, 650 euros, by the way. Euros when it hits retail in September. But do you know what the thing I love about it most is, Andy? Look at the picture. There's a hint on the picture.
Drilled lugs, baby.
Drilled lugs. It's really nice. I'd recommend it. There's also a PVD version, which I reckon you'd be into.
Yeah, okay. Oh, maybe we have to get a matching pair.
Nice. You been into anything?
Yeah, look, it's been gone yesterday, but I was looking at a Bonham's auction, which I heard about via Spike's Car Radio, one of my favourite non-watch podcasts, although Spike Ferriston is a watch guy. Jerry Seinfeld sold one of his Porsches, his 2016 911 GT3 RS, which was pretty cool. So he sold that through Bonham's on the 10th. So yesterday. Pretty cool to see a Seinfeld car. As people that know, comedians in cars getting coffee. He's a massive car guy. He kind of appears on that podcast often. His love for cars goes. I think he's always like been obsessed with cars since he was a kid. Like he's got like Yeah. So like throughout Seinfeld, his personal cars were like parked on the street.
There's a lot of car references in there as well.
heaps. But like, he's like, $500,000 911 was parked on the street as they walked past or something as like little Easter eggs. So he sort of sprinkled them throughout his life.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, this is sort of liquid chrome blue in metallic with a whole bunch of extra options. So I think it sold yesterday for, including premiums, $467,000, which is more than he paid 2 years ago. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, so he bought it in 2019 or something?
No, it's a 2016 model.
Yeah, okay.
So he's had it for a few years. I think he put 1,500 kilometers or something on there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You might have answered this, but do you know what the car's worth if it's not owned by Jerry Seinfeld?
Probably $100,000 less. I would have thought.
That's the Jerry
the
tax.
Estimate was, yeah, I think there's a decent Jerry tax just because he is so into it, and it's looked after. It's low miles, as they say.
Yeah. Hey, I got a related question. What do you reckon
Uh-huh.
an Ellen-owned Daytona would be worth?
Depends on the Daytona. I don't know the Ellen, because she hasn't really opened up about it. I think like a John Mayer, John Mayer.
Yeah, because you'd be able to like peep the serial numbers or whatever, and
She's just like never spoken about her watches, or at least John Mayer has. So I feel like the John Mayer Daytona
Gold Daytona. God, people will go nuts over that, wouldn't they?
Oh, they already. I mean, those things have climbed. I don't know why they've climbed like $10,000 in a couple of weeks, $20,000 in a couple of weeks. They're going for a lot of money.
Silliness, Andy. It's silly. You know, it's not silly.
Tell me.
New IWCs. Well, we've got to chat about them with Chris Granger in a few minutes, but we obviously, Andy, we got a bit of it under embargo sort of before we recorded the conversation.
Signed our life away.
So we talk mostly, I think, about the BP43, but there's some we don't talk about, including, Andy, my absolute favourite watch from IWC, the BP XPL Feet BMG.
Boom. What's XPL stand for?
I'm not sure. Does it stand for anything?
There's a test. Yeah, it's IWC Experimental Engineering Division.
It's not really. It doesn't stand for experiment. It's just a cool abbreviation.
Say it really quickly. It's their top secret division.
It's like the number plate
where they make Iron Man suits.
Yeah. So it's basically, as far as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The watch, it's a theoretically a big pilot. The watch movement is free floating inside the case, supported by a bulk metallic glass shock absorbing spring, I think, like a structure of some sort that's
cantilever spring. Yeah, suspends the movement inside the case,
which means that it can withstand something.
Spring G.
What?
That's what it's called. SPRIN-G Protect. So I guess it's like Springer Protect.
Sprunger. Anyway, the Sprunger means that it can withstand some truly ridiculous amounts of force.
G's, 30,000 G's.
And that's more G's than anyone could. I mean, I don't know, what could a human body withstand?
I mean,
I think I seem to recall like the guys in jet fighters deal with like a few thousand, maybe.
I don't even think it's that many.
No,
I think it's like I don't know. I feel like the Rock running at you full speed would probably be like 10,000 Gs. So if it was like 3 of the Rocks running at you, maybe.
It's the Rock starring in a remake of the Rock, the classic Nick Cage, Sean Connery movie by Jerry Bruckheimer, I believe. While I don't know, something else of Rocky, listening to rock,
listen to heavy metal. It is limited to 10 pieces per year as well.
Yes.
It took 8 years to develop this tech.
Yeah, it's an odd move, but kind of cool.
Yeah. At least they're doing it. I think it's pretty cool that they have like a department dedicated to this.
Do you know what I think, in all seriousness, is a little cooler and perhaps a little bit more attainable?
What's that?
The quick change straps for the new 43mm Big Pilot.
Yeah, let me pull up the press release for that.
The most impressive thing about it is I like the fact that they're doing rubber straps for it, and they've got those of those dual rivets, and they come in nice colors, and you can change them quickly, and that it's like legitimately a sporty. You can get it wet. I just think it's cool.
Yeah, It's. I mean, and the new size, of course, which we talk about, 43mm. Instead of, I mean, what was a traditional Big Pilot? 46, like 46, right?
45.7, I believe, or something like that. 46.2.
Yeah, so they significantly reduced the overall volume of the case.
Simplified the design, taken it back to its, roots, so to speak. Also, it's been really well received. Like, I I was a bit unsure when I sort of first saw them, and I if whether or not the market would come in on it.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's 10,000 ish.
I think it's about 10K Aussie,
Yeah, entry. And that's a fair chunk of change for what's a fairly simple watch. And I didn't know where it would sort of sit in terms of the tweaking an icon, but people seem pretty positive about it on the internet.
Well, they also tweaked the Pilot's watch Chronograph 41.
Yes, yeah, that's a nice update.
Yeah, the Ease X change system, which you talked about, in blue and green dial, which is cool. Year of the green dial.
Funny that, isn't it? Do you know one watch that I do think is also really cool in their collection that I will never ever wear?
Oh, you love this watch.
The Big Pilot Mojave.
You had this does something to you.
Have you? You probably haven't had it because you're a vegan. Caramilk. Are you familiar with that?
I have not.
Are you familiar with it? The advertising.
I know what it is.
It's that color.
Is it?
Kinda.
You just love the Mojave Desert. I don't know why. Like every time,
I just want to go to Palm Springs and get high on peyote.
But I don't know why you love it so much, but you wouldn't wear it. You wouldn't buy it.
I think it's cool. I think I don't have to think. There's a lot of watches I really love that I don't have to wear. Because they cost $60,000.
But even if it was, they said have this watch, I don't know that you would.
I might. I reckon if Chris Granger listens to this and he's going, Felix, I'm not going to do his accent because that's terrible. Felix, really love this, your support for us and the Mojave Desert coloration. Please have this Big Pilot. I would 100% take it, and I would wear it. I reckon I'd probably have to wear it on like a bund strap or something, just because otherwise I feel it would just like camouflage into my wrist.
You just lose it because you've got caramel skin.
It's mostly my diet. I am what I eat, and it's caramel.
100% caramel. Just running through your veins. All right. Well, enough of that. And that chat is coming up. Before we speak to Mr. Grainger-Herr, Chris, as we call him, we're going to get Brian Govberg on the line. We're going to do this challenge with him, building the 50K watch collection using WatchBox, the watchbox.com. So all the watches we talk about are on the website, except maybe Ryan goes off script a little bit.
Yeah, well, he can. He can make them appear in inventory if he wants. That's his
he can
power.
just like make inventory appear and also like change the prices of things. So maybe Brian cheats, maybe he doesn't. But yeah, this is really cool. So WatchBox have brought this episode to you guys, which is also awesome. And yeah, let's do it. Let's dial Brian in and do it. Felix, today's episode is brought to you by WatchBox. WatchBox is the world's leading platform for buying, selling, and the trading of pre-owned watches in the luxury space, fueled by technology, innovation, and an unmatched global experience and inventory. Felix, today we have Brian Govberg on the line, and we're having a bit of fun.
Yeah, so Brian, welcome to OT the podcast. How are you?
I am good. Thank you both so much for having me.
No, it's very much our pleasure. So we were just talking off mic before about what we've cooked up for today. And here at OT, we love a hypothetical watch question. And we've come up with a really, really good one today, I think. Not just a hypothetical watch. We've asked you to come up with an entire hypothetical collection or a hypothetical, I'm sorry about this, watch box, if you will. Now, we've put a cap on it.
Oh, Felix.
You've only got $50,000 to play with, but I think we can have a fair bit of fun with that. Before we get to your collection, which I genuinely can't wait to see where you go with it, because you can do so many things with $50,000 and, WatchBox's inventory. We thought we'd sort of talked about what Andy and I have come up with as a collective collection, I suppose. Andy, what was the first watch that you picked out of this?
Okay, so the first watch that I picked was a Rolex GMT Master 2 Saru, so a gem set novelty. I did send a few DMs to the WatchBox Instagram and try and get like a bit of a discount code or something, but they weren't sort of willing to take $200K off the price. So where I landed was a Rolex Day-Date 36mm Platinum. So the reference is 18206. And that puts it sort of, I think, in the early 90s. N serial, now that I'm double checking. $25,950 which, that's actually a lot of watch for the money. And I've always wanted one of these. I've always wanted a 36 Platinum Prezi. They don't do it in the current lineup either. So you can't get a 36 Platinum, maybe sometime soon. But yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with that ice blue dial.
That's very solid. Brian, do you endorse that pick?
I definitely do. And
Nice.
I don't know if you took a look at the recent novelty launches, but they actually just came out with a beautiful new 40 millimeter platinum day-date
Yeah,
with
They
the ice
cleaned up
blue
the dial a
dial.
little bit, right?
yeah. That's so. This put me in a tricky position. So because Andy's blown half the budget immediately, he's also filled everyday watch and theoretically a dress watch. I think you can probably wear a platinum day-date to anything with a tuxedo and you'll look fine. But
Yeah, for sure.
I thought I'd sort of go with, given the money, I think you want 3 watches for that. We've got that's the hero in the collection, and I thought I'd sort of go for a more casual piece and a more formal piece. For the more formal piece, I had no problems. I knew immediately what I wanted to go for, and that was something from Langer. And given the money, I sort of wanted to. You could have gone a few ways, but I've always had a soft spot for the 37 millimeter Saxonia. So I went with one in rose gold. It's around $15,000 and it's just a beautiful manually wound, typical German excellence. There's not much more to say about that watch. Andy, do you endorse my selection?
Yes, 37 millimeters. I love it. I love it. Brian, what do you think?
So I have a smaller wrist. 37 millimeter happens to, I would almost say, is the perfect size for me. 37, 38 is really where I find most of my watches fall, just in terms of being the perfect size for my wrist.
Yep.
I mean, there's nothing negative that you can say about the watch. I mean, it's classic. It's the type of watch that you can definitely wear it for dress. You could probably even wear it a little bit more casually, depending upon the strap that you put on it. But just great pick.
Yeah, and I think I've got a bigger wrist, and I'd still say for that sort of formal dress watch, 37 millimeters is exactly where you want to be.
Great value too. Can I just say, under 15K US? That is really solid.
Yeah,
solid value.
And so
a lot of watch for the money.
So now the third watch. We're looking at around 10K in budget. Definitely can't be playing with the precious metal space because we've got 2 out of 2 there. We probably could. I had a bit of a look. We can find some really good some gold pieces for not that sort of much in the budget. But I thought there were 2 obvious gaps. There is nothing that's like a truly sort of everyday wear it around, don't stress about it piece. So that's steel, and there's nothing particularly complicated. So I thought the obvious lack was a chronograph, which led me to, of course, the Amiga Speedmaster. It's, you have to have a Speedmaster in a collection, but it did leave me with a problem, guys, and that was which one to pick. In the end, I went with one of the hypier ones and one I'm personally a very big fan of, the Amiga Speedmaster Tokyo with the red bezel. And it's perfectly priced at around 10K.
Interesting. Yeah, you just harp on about this speed, and you love the fact that it's for the Olympics that never happened. That is, yeah. As soon as you said we needed a highly complicated watch, that's exactly where my mind darted. That's yeah. Okay. Well,
This is an awesome pick.
That. Yeah, I thought so.
What do you think?
I was pretty happy with that. A lot of the three watches.
Yeah. No, I mean the color scheme of the watches I think is fantastic. Obviously for the Olympics that didn't happen, so there's been a lot of chatter on the forums just about, will this add to the collectability of the watch down the line? But I think it's just there's been a million Speedmaster iterations.
Yep.
So I think that there's been ones where I would say, oh, okay, maybe that missed the mark. But for me, this one strikes all the right tones. I love the color of the bezel. I love the tone on tone with the dial in the case. I think it's a knockout.
Yeah, and it's a bit, in terms of you're right, there's a heap of Speedmaster versions and you can't really go too far wrong with them. But I think this one does stand out with the silver dial and the color. So it's a good pick. I was happy with it. But that's us, Brian. Where have you gone with your $50,000 budget?
So I did a 3-watch collection also.
Nice.
I just feel like if you're gonna build a collection like this, 3 just seems to be the right number. Yep. So for my first pick, I went with a Vacheron Overseas Deep Stream. I think that Gen 2. So I think that it's a watch that very much goes unnoticed as far as the sports watch category goes. I think the Overseas in general goes a little bit unnoticed, but the Gen 2 Vacheron Overseas, steel case, titanium bezel, comes on a rubber strap. You can also put a croc strap on it. It's got that like gray anthracite titanium coloring for the dial. I just think it's an awesome great watch that you can dress up or dress down.
And what's the budget on that one?
So I put the budget. So I put the budget on that one. We haven't actually had one in some time, but I put the budget on that one at 13,000.
Yeah,
which actually which may be a little bit light now. I mean, I messed with the numbers a little bit just to come in at the 50.
I suppose you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you.
Quite easily.
So if anybody's listening
huge
to this,
discounts on Vacherons.
Yeah, I don't have it available at 13 if you're listening to this, but 13 is my number on that watch.
That's your buy price.
Brian special.
Yeah, exactly. So for watch number 2, I figured I have to have a Rolex in the collection.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So I went with the Pepsi on the Jubilee bracelet.
Ooh.
I love the watch. It's iconic. You can wear it all the time. I'm a big fan of the Jubilee bracelet. There was a lot of mixed feelings about it when it first came out, but for me, it was just perfect. So, and I had that in at 19,000.
So we're talking a current gen?
Current gen, yes. And I'm obviously talking current market values also. So that's a watch that retails for far less than that. But for the purpose of this collection, I put it in at current pre-owned prices.
And you're happy with that addition at that market price? That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think with all watches now, especially when demand so far outweighs supply, this isn't going away anytime soon. Yep. But for the most sought after watches, the actual the price at which you can trade in and out of the watch at, if you're a collector, is very tight to that current ask price. And it's actually, you would lose a lot less on a watch like this, even paying over market, as you would buying, let's call it a $20,000 watch from a brand that's perhaps not in vogue.
Yeah, that's good.
And yeah, and you know what, I obviously I could have thrown it in at 9,000, but for the purposes of this, I just felt like it was the right thing to do. Yeah, I felt like the right thing to do was to be putting it in at market prices.
So I've done some quick maths, and based on those sort of rough prices, I reckon you got about 18,000 left, which is a lot.
I've 18,000 left, and I'm a big Patek Philippe fan. Ooh. And so I went with a 5196G, which is a Calatrava solid case back, super classic, good size. I want to say it comes in at 30. I believe it's what's the millimeter? Yeah, like 37 millimeter in size, just classically executed, still in the line. And for me, just a timeless, elegant dress watch that I could have in the collection.
You do have one on the site for $22,950. So I mean, maybe you can work out a bundle deal for all three.
As I said, I had to move the numbers just a little bit. So maybe my prices are from like, you know, what the watch industry moves so fast. So maybe my prices are from like 1 month ago.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you know, there's got to be some more Patek releases that are going to change the values by the time this comes out. Who knows? That's a solid lineup. I mean, it's interesting. So you've gone 2 sports, 1 dress. We've done the same. Yeah, it's so we didn't
good coverage in brands as well. Yeah,
so we didn't sort of talk about this too much beforehand, and it's interesting that we've sort of gone down similar routes with that budget. We will link everything up as much as we can. We'll link up sort of equivalent examples, or you know, the actual sort of stock that we chose from. Brian, are there any other sort of tips you've got for someone looking to build their collection?
I always say buy what you love. I'm a big fan of eclectic watches. I'm into old Roger Dubuis. I like, call it pre-2000s Richemont, like, you know, pre-Richemont Vacheron, for example, like the old Saltarellos. So I think just buy what you love, and then you can never go wrong because you're going to love what's in the collection.
Yeah, I like that. Were there any pieces that you kind of came close to adding to this and you didn't, the ones that kind of didn't make it past the cutting room floor?
Oh, I mean, I went through like a dozen different variations of this. So I think other watches that I was looking at was the Bulgari Octafenicimo.
Nice.
And I was sort of torn between the all titanium version or the new one in stainless with a blue dial. We've been fortunate enough to have a few pre-owned ones of those. I think the Octafenicimo is one of the best integrated steel watches that's come along in a long time. The watch itself is fantastic on the wrist. They have 1 million patents. And I think that it's, again, another watch that doesn't get enough, call it credibility amongst watch collectors.
What was the hardest part about sort of, choosing these three pieces?
I think just how they play with each other. Like I knew that I wanted to have a dress watch. I knew that I wanted to have a watch with a rubber strap, something that's sporty. And I knew that I wanted to have a watch on a stainless steel bracelet. So everything was sort of moving around based on having these different pillars within the collection. And anytime I would add, like, I had at one point the Octafenicimo and the Pepsi. I'm like, if I'm only going to have 3 watches, are these different enough? Even though they're incredibly different, but are they different enough for the purposes of having only 3?
Absolutely. That is, I think that's a really interesting way to come at a collection from how they're going to be worn. So you've come sort of from the strap first, like you haven't gone brand, you haven't gone complication, you've gone how they will feel on the wrist and what purpose they will have. So that's... I think that's very, very smart and sensible. But I think that's about all we've got time for today, actually, Brian. So thank you so much for having coming on, OT the podcast. We will definitely have to get you back on. But for now, when shopping at the WatchBox, you can enjoy a guaranteed authenticity, 2 years warranty, and free express global shipping. So whether you're in the market for a new watch, looking to sell, trade, hit up the WatchBox today at thewatchbox.com. Buy world-class timepieces with confidence and convenience. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you both.
Andy, how good was that? Solid choices, obviously, from Brian Govberg, but also I think we did okay in this one.
I think we did well, especially for the both of us. I think we built a pretty
Platinum,
cohesive
baby.
collection.
Platinum. Do we get to share that, or is that just yours?
I mean, no, it's mine.
All right. Fair enough. We'll link all that stuff up, but we don't have time to talk about it anymore because we have to get IWC Schaffhausen CEO on the line, Mr. Granger. Please note, though, because, this is not recorded in a studio by any means. The audio is a little bit choppy. But yeah, second time on the podcast, Mr. Granger. Let's get into it. Andy, we've got the wonderful Mr. Granger, who insists on being called Chris, back for round 2. Last time we spoke was just about a year ago, actually.
Wow.
At the start of this whole...
time flies.
Yeah, well, literally time flies, not to give the game away, but we're here talking to IWC CEO, Mr. Granger, and the question I want to start with is about the Big Pilot's watch.
Ooh.
Chris, the Big Pilot, it's a big pilot because it's big. It's its defining aspect. Why would you make it smaller?
Well, thank you for that excellent question. I did wonder that as well for about 14 years. But no, the story behind this really is that when you look at the global market we're in today, obviously there's a lot of different sized and shaped wrists and a lot of different ergonomics. And we just always found that a 46 millimeter watch, by its conception, when we made it back in 2002, it was oversized, overpowered, and everything about it was over. And I think what we tried to do with this one, because we've seen obviously that on many wrists, there's a lot of people who love the design of the Big Pilot, but who will categorically say to me, look at my wrist, I can't wear 46 millimeters. It's just too big for me. And we tried to see if there is a formula where I can get to a size, a diameter, and a height where it looks and feels like a Big Pilot, and I've got that purity of the instrument, and I've got the way that the weight and the feel it sits on the wrist, but it's actually wearable for a much, much bigger percentage of our clients. And I think this is where we got to with a 43 mil, where we did a series of experiments of different proportions, height, size, crown proportions, to get to something which looks and feels every bit like a Big Pilot, but at the same time gives you the ergonomics of a watch you can actually wear in all settings. And that's why, in the end, we offered the second line of Big Pilots, 43 millimeters.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I fall into that category of someone who admires it, but can't quite pull the size off. I have noticed you wear a Big Pilot, and you've obviously worn the watch quite a lot. I want to know which one you're going to kind of reach for now. The original size or the newer, smaller size?
I think it really depends on the functionality. So for me personally, when you go to a Big Pilot's automatic and a freehand layout, I will definitely wear the 43 millimeters. I also absolutely love the rubber strap version that I've got on right now. You obviously can't see on the podcast with that quick change system where you can switch between the leather strap, the rubber strap, the metal bracelet. So if it's an automatic, my choice would be 43 millimeters in the future, probably on the rubber strap, and then on the blue leather strap. If it's complicated, if it's in perpetual calendar, definitely continue to wear 46, because the proportions and the detail in the dial work just so perfectly on the 46. So that's going to be my go-to on the perpetual calendars.
Yeah, fantastic. Good answer. Now, the pricing on these are much more aggressive. Can we expect this sort of increased value across the broader IWC catalog?
Well, I think it's what we've really seen over the last 3 launches now, starting with the Spitfire originally back in 2019, then the Portugieser in 2020, and now the Pilots in 2021. Across the range, we really see that you're buying more and more watch for your money, in the sense that, of course, now you have an 8 years warranty, in-house movement, glass case back, you have increased waterproofing, 10 bar, you have all of the functionality of the 5-link bracelet with the fine adjustment, the quick change system, and so on. So I do think that across the industry, but especially since we've opened our new manufacturing center here in Schaffhausen, the content that our clients buy into with our watches is increasing dramatically. And I do think that is a win-win situation for everybody.
Absolutely. One thing I find really interesting as well about this new Big Pilot 43 is it uses a different movement. It's got a sort of an automatic with, I think, 60 hours of power reserve. Is that about right?
So this is the 82 caliber automatic,
cool.
Which is a slightly smaller diameter than the 52 caliber 7 days.
Sure. And I believe you can fit the 52 caliber into a watch around, 43. It was used in the Portuguesers. Yeah. Did you consider using the 52 cal in there for that sort of iconic power reserve indicator? And if you did, what made you decide against it in the end?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I wanted to achieve a differentiation in dial design. And really the one thing that many of our clients have asked for over the years is to do a no-date version with a puristic dial, because the original Big Pilot back in the 1940s, of course, had a pure numbers and index only layout that really had no date, no power reserve. Yes, you're right. You could theoretically at a push fit the 52 caliber into the case, but you would get a rather strange layout in front where the power reserve and the date would sit like totally on the edge of the dial, and like you wouldn't have a balanced effect. And then of course you also you just have a different proportion version of the 46, which frankly looks a bit off in the end. So we thought it was a good idea to introduce a differentiated dial layout and a differentiated price point on that slightly smaller model to really complete the range. Because today, when I speak to customers in the boutique, you have a Mark 18 freehand pilot's watch from IWC at a certain price point, and then there's a big gap for another automatic watch until you go into the price point of the Big Pilot. And the new Big Pilot 43 really sits beautifully in that range between Mark 18 and then the Chronograph 41, Chronograph 43, Big Pilot 43 freehand automatic, and then the Big Pilot plus all of the complications on the top of the range in 46.
Great answer. And you've touched on the 100-meter water resistance, the new quick strap change, and those additional strap options, which are new for the Big Pilot, and also the Pilot's Chronograph.
Yeah.
And I think you've just talked about it then, speaking to customers. You're one of the more accessible brand CEOs, if we will, very active on social media. You kind of engage with the IWC community. Has any of that feedback been taken on board in terms of things like price and size for sort of this Big Pilot model?
Always, for us, there's a duality to what we do. On the one hand, of course, it's design and creative driven of all of the things that we do in terms of the R&D, the engineering, and the design. And on the other hand, I think the beauty of luxury these days is that there is so much more interaction, so much more feedback with our clients. And I really do think that that's brought the luxury watch market much more back to what it needs to be. I think we had in the 80s and 90s, there was almost a disconnect when luxury became a little bit mass and a little bit sort of one directional. And now all of the communication platforms and all of the digital tech has actually allowed us to bring luxury back much more to a one-on-one conversation between client and creator. And this is really what luxury always has been in the past. This was individual clients commissioning pieces from individual craftsmen. And this was always based on a personal relationship. And I think thanks to all of the platforms, and especially now Clubhouse, which has been a major innovation when it comes to the way we connect, that's really made a huge difference. And of course, Clubhouse is a problem because I don't get any sleep anymore, but it means that, I can today, connect directly with any, watch collector or watch club anywhere on the planet. And when there's a conversation going on that's interesting, sometimes it comes from a car background, sometimes it comes from a pure watch background, you find yourself suddenly discussing a particular element. That's feedback you probably never would have gotten like that before. But because you can jump into these conversations, actually, that's interesting what you're saying. Like, tell me more. And then, you get a completely different level of feedback from people than we even had on Instagram or any other social media platform. So I do think that's been a major, major factor in the way we create products today.
Fascinating. And one more question on this new big pilot before we move on to some of your other new releases. I'm assuming that the smaller size means that it'll be a great commercial success. I assume you're hoping that as well. Do you think there's ever a future where that classic larger size big pilot is discontinued because the 43 millimeter, ticks all the boxes?
Well, that's an interesting question. I had a very similar discussion recently where somebody asked me about the diameter trends in the industry and is it all going smaller and so on. And my answer to that is really, I do see a great diversity today in what clients are looking for in terms of sizes. And I don't think there is a clear trend today that says all the watches are going smaller, all the watches are going bigger. You really see still brands doing very, very well on 46 millimeters and above. And on the other hand, you have people who are looking for more classic, smaller, slimmer watches at the same time. And today, when I look at what people are asking for in different parts of the world and different markets, there is a great multitude of requests and likes and requirements. And I honestly don't think that just by making this step, it's going to be the end of 46 automatic. What I do think is that hopefully it brings a whole new set of clients to IWC that like the design, but they would have never bought a 46 millimeter watch. And that's clearly the case in many regions of Asia, where we can see that today, that it's just that size is not resonating, even when people like sports watches. So I don't think it's going to be a straightforward migration. You see that on the chronographs as well. We have side by side the 41 and 43 millimeter sizes successfully. And at the moment, we're in a phase in the watch industry where really it's going both ways. And there's tastes for larger, smaller, all at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And, a lot of people cry out, and, that's a common thing that you hear is, I wish I would buy this watch if it was, a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. And I can imagine that's a hard, it's an ongoing battle, especially, when you've got global customers. Yeah. So you've talked about it now. The big pilot isn't the only model that you've sort of shrunk down. There's the new pilot's Chronograph 41, which is, 41 millimeters. It's got that same 100-meter water resistance, quick change strap again, and again with the bracelets. This one's a really interesting offering because of the price point. It's sort of 7 to 7.5, thousand. It's a very competitive price point. Who do you see as the sort of customer for this model?
For me, the Pilot's Chronograph is really a perfect all-round first watch. That's where it's positioned. I think the 41 makes it extremely wearable. The in-house movement, the waterproofing, the sapphire glass case back. You have a full day date. You have this clearly legible dial in beautiful green, beautiful blue. And you have this new tapered 5-link bracelet with a fine adjustment, which really is ergonomically a dream. It's one of those watches during the first prototype meeting when the team presented it to me. I put it on my wrist and I completely forgot I was wearing it in the end. I walked out of the room and my colleague Walter was like, "No, give it back. Can I leave that with us?" And literally, it is a different level of comfort. And that's, I think, where we really now cracked that Pilot's expression size triangle. And you've got something which is a perfect all-round everyday watch. And with the versatility on being able to put a sports rubber strap on that in different colors, but at the same time having bracelet or the classic leather, I do think it's a perfect first sports watch that if you're looking for that, often people said to me before, it's a Mark 18 is sort of the perfect daily, the perfect all-rounder. But I think now Chrono 41, if I had to choose one watch to wear every single day, it's that one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real winner, and I suspect it's going to be very, very popular here in Australia. One thing that sort of this brings to mind, the movement to an in-house movement on this sort of entry-level chrono. Do you plan to bring everything in-house, or will there always sort of be a place for those third-party movements in the IWC catalog?
Well, I think let's see. What we're doing at the moment is really that what we've been able to do, thanks to the investment in our new manufacturing center, is really bring in that capability from a basic automatic freehand 32 caliber movement all the way to the complicated 59 caliber hand-wound monopusher, the perpetual calendars, and so on, really to demonstrate that both in the high-end segment, but also in our core business, we can offer great movements at competitive prices with very, very, very good quality. And especially the caliber 69, which we've, I think, had in the ramp up now for about 3 years since it was first introduced. It's made massive, massive strides in terms of the standard of quality excellence that we've been able to achieve. And I think that's a very strong statement for our clients to say, look, as a fully functioning manufacturer with our own case making, with our own expertise in titanium, ceramics, and so on, plus this capability of having every type of in-half movement from a Spitfire automatic caliber 32 all the way to a flying tourbillon chronograph on the caliber 89 in the Portuguesa. All of that can be done in the same facility here in Schaffhausen. And that, of course, is something you'll see coming over the range. And we've seen it in Pilot Spitfire, we've seen it in the Portuguesa, we've seen it in the Pilots, and that's going to continue.
Great. One of the other models that you haven't really talked about yet is one of the ones that I'm personally most excited about, and that's the two new Mojave extensions.
Yes.
In terms of sheer visual appeal, these I think are they're just great. They're really luscious, and there's something sort of really exciting and fun, I think, for IWC.
Yeah.
Two-part question for you. How hard does IWC find working with ceramic? And, you know, is your expertise going to continue to evolve? Are we going to see other bold, colorful expressions in ceramic?
Absolutely. So the whole, I don't know if I told you the story, how all of this came about originally with the colored ceramics. I'm not sure if we touched on that last year at all. But basically, the story was when I started to work with our friends in the US Navy, one of my first trips took me to Naval Air Station China Lake, many, many miles north of LA. And as I was there, I saw obviously the desert-colored flight suits, and obviously people there training in the Mojave Desert in an area called Rainbow Canyon, which is one of those high-speed, low-flight training areas that is probably most infamous for the narrow canyons. The pilots train in a very low altitude. And when I saw all of that, I thought, you know, beyond all of the black and everything we're doing, we have to start making stuff that really matches those flight suits. And I was going back thinking, okay, how do we get to that sort of muted, subdued, single color expression on a watch that still retains the character of a pilot's watch? And I actually pulled in for petrol halfway back to the airport, and I kept on thinking about it and saw the sign basically just said Mojave Texaco, and I was like, oh, there we go, Mojave Desert, that's going to be the name. And that's how we ended up making the first Mojave Desert chrono, really based on that inspiration. And now we've extended the line into the perpetual calendar and into the big Pilot, and I agree with you, it's something that is a very unique look. It's got all the character of an IWC pilot's watch, but it's a very, very different expression that still makes sense in that aviation context. And that, of course, is not going to stop at the tan-colored ceramics, and you'll see more of that coming later on in the year.
Yeah, very cool. Felix is a very, very big fan of the Mojave. He loves the colorway. So one watch we haven't talked about, and I know I'll caveat this with knowing that these new watches aren't all you've got coming out this year. There's more to come, we've been told. A watch that, you know, IWC hardcore fans have been talking about a lot over the last few years is the Ingenieur. You know, outside looking in, it looks like a very obvious watch to update.
Yeah.
Is there any plans in the work for that? What do you kind of see as the future of that model?
Absolutely. Watch the space. I'd say, you know, that discussion is a very good one. I think it's the right one to have. I think looking back at what makes the DNA of IWC is a clear, for many markets, and that's quite interesting because the Ingenieur actually historically has had its strength in some core markets. When I look at, of course, Central Europe, you know, sort of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Australia, I think to a certain extent as well, Japan very strongly, and the Ingenieur really resonates in people's minds when they think about IWC, because you have this idea of the purity of the engineering of that watch, the anti-magnetic, that Gerald Genta design, which by the way was the round one of the three famous Gentas. Everything else octagonal or porthole shaped, but the engineer really is that starting point of the round Genta design. And clearly in our history in DNA, there's a clear place for it. I think the engineer has seen a couple of iterations over the years, and it needs to be brought back to the essence and the purity of what that expression originally stood for. But yes, we're working on that.
In a sort of perhaps unrelated question, do you have any plans or thoughts on that sort of more industry-wide trend of everyone getting in on the integrated steel sports offerings? Can you see IWC moving in that direction?
Well, I think you have two natural lines at IWC that are integrated. One being the Aqua Timer, the other one being the Engineer. I'm not looking at that purely from an industry trend perspective, because for IWC, many of the iconic designs of IWC have traditionally been strap watches. You look at Portuguese, Chronograph, Big Pilot, etc. Traditionally, they come from that root, and that's also something that's unique to IWC. And my approach to building the brand is definitely not copy paste, and that's why I don't simply go by, everybody's doing an integrated steel sports watch and blue dial, we've got to do the same. Is there a place for integrated steel watches naturally in the collection? Yes, there is. Will we see some? Yes, we will, but not because we also now need a steel on steel blue sports watch in Genta style.
How important? No, that's a great answer. How important is it to you to get that update right on the Engineer? Because obviously there'll be a lot of eyeballs on it, and people can be
it's
pretty...
a life and death kind of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's not one you want to get wrong. That's for sure.
Okay, take your time. All right. Well, so we mentioned at the start we spoke to you a year ago, and nearly a year ago, and geez, a lot has changed. And watches and manufacturing is always a slow-moving beast. These watches that you've released, we can only speculate they've been in the works for years now. What I'm keen to hear from a global brand CEO like yourself is how has IWC sort of responded to COVID-19? What's changed? What's had to evolve? And how has it affected business in a general sense?
Yeah. No, I think it's been, of course, beyond the hardship and the suffering and the losses and all the rest of it. It's been a very interesting learning curve, because, of course, it put us in a place where it suddenly was all about the power to be agile and the power to innovate. And I think it really brought out the strength of the team, in the sense that I was so impressed how quickly all of our colleagues turned this around and adapted to this new situation and innovated all across the board in the way we do selling, do communication, keep in touch with our clients, bring product to market. I mean, you mentioned it earlier quickly before we started, that suddenly, broadcasting from a studio and set up for podcasts and all the rest of it is become natural, which a year ago we didn't have a studio. We didn't know how to do global live streaming. We didn't know how to release watch collections purely digitally, etc. We were still very much in that industry mode of trade fairs, etc., etc. And I think when I see how quickly everything migrated to a one-on-one and mass digital interactive format, that's been a massive learning curve. And it made me very, very proud to see last year how quickly our teams responded to this and took on this new challenge, where we could have, worst case, just sat back and say, well, everything's closed. When are they coming back? But we really reinvented the way that all of this client interaction worked last year. And that's surely here to stay, because I think the way that people look at brands has changed a lot in the last 12 months. I think we've really gone away from this sort of very in-your-face influencer marketing, big events, to much more substance, people connecting much more with the people behind the brands, looking much more at engineering, technology, the value you're getting in products, etc. And I think we've built many more relationships. Of course, everybody's looking forward to seeing each other face to face again and have an actual relationship. But in terms of increasing reach on an individual basis, through what technology is offering us, I think we've made massive strides over the last year, and that's surely here to stay.
That's, I think, very
fantastic.
true, and that's a really positive outlook, and making the most out of a very unusual situation. And as you said, you've learnt as a business, as a company, a heap over the last 12 months. You may or may not remember that last time we spoke, we ended our interview asking for a personal recommendation of something you've been doing to pass the time. And at that time, you were, I think, locked in your house, like so much of the world, and you were encouraging us all to exercise wherever possible and telling us about how you were, I don't know, jumping on tables and things like that. How, this time, 1 year on, what are you doing to pass the time in a recreational way? Have you been reading anything, studying up on the history of pilots' watches in your spare time? Anything fun?
Anything fun? Yes. I mean, we're very, very lucky. Definitely. I mean, we started the world of Clubhouse is definitely what we've picked up lately, which is a lot of fun and is a steep learning curve, and it's definitely a different way to spend the hours beyond reading. It's also highly entertaining to see how this new trend of pretending you are on a Zoom call whilst actually listening to Clubhouse is taking hold globally, and people sitting with their AirPods pretending they're in meetings when they're actually not. I had this the other day with a good friend of ours who had tried to ping into our conversation, and he actually wrote back to me and said, "Chris, I'd love to join, but I'm actually in a rather boring video meeting at the moment, and I'm listening to you guys in my AirPods." So this is clearly what's new in the last 12 months. And other than that, we've been very fortunate here in Switzerland to still be always able to go out and enjoy nature, which is not the case all over Europe. And that's what I've been doing. So I think I've become a better skier again this year, for sure. Spent much more time on the slopes. I've beat my previous speed record last Saturday. So we'll keep working on that. I've got a little goal this year and hopefully not break my neck in the process. But that's, I really do think that it's that balance at the moment, which is actually better than it used to be, between sort of, because we cut out all of the traveling, we cut out the inefficiency of, sometimes traveling halfway across the continent for a 1 hour meeting. A lot of that has gone, and that's given us more time, I think, to be with a team, but also to balance this with the family time and the time to stay healthy. And I think generally when I look around at the teams, and it's been very good for the physical well-being. We're having trouble. Of course, people are the mental well-being is not always the same, and it's getting, the longer the lockdown continues here, the trickier that gets for families, for individuals who've been working from home for a very, very long time. But I think what we'll find after this is a real balance between the interaction, the physical relationships, all the rest of it, the face-to-face, but at the same time, not going back to the craze of inefficiency of what we used to lose by just basically sitting on planes and in taxis and on trains the whole time.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with the skiing, Mr. Chris Grainger-Herr. Thank you so much for coming back to OT, the podcast. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you for having me.
Always good to talk, and we can't wait to see sort of these watches get released and see what the reception's like, and see what you and IWC do with the rest of the year. Absolutely, and hopefully see you out there very soon, once Florian allows me to actually immigrate again.
We can't
see Florian. He said, it's cancelled. It's cancelled.
He hasn't had a performance review in 18 months.
I didn't want to travel out to the Australian Opens. I think that would have been a bit risky, but maybe later in the year.
I think you've still got to open a boutique or two, right?
Yes, I think this will be the most delayed formal opening of any boutique we've ever opened, but maybe one day.
One day. Love it.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks,
Enjoy
guys.
the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Felix, it's nice when guests return for a second time.
It means we didn't stuff up the first time, really.
Yeah, it means their PR people are okay with us.
Yep.
So,
thank you to IWC. Thank you to IWC Australia as well for helping put that together.
Yeah.
Always nice to have
the whole
support.
gang. Yes. Thank you to WatchBox for supporting this episode and, organising for Brian to come on. If you want to check out their great range of inventory, head to thewatchbox.com. Like we said, we'll link it all up. We'll link the watches we talked about. If you want to email us, otthepodcast@gmail.com. Felix, what's our Instagram handle?
It's ot.podcast, as always. It's a great way to get in touch with us. Send us a message.
Well, and if you like OT, subscribe, tell your friends, leave a review, 5 stars only.
Positive reviews only.
Positive reviews only. We only hear the good things. We don't need this negative feedback in our lives. Friends, neighbours, people down the street, next suburb over, blast it through your car speakers when you're commuting.
Yeah, do that.
We'll see you. Yeah. And get some stickers. I don't know. We'll see you soon.